Welcome to this episode of Turning Grief into Growth, the Journey of Transformation. This is a podcast that's hosted by Greg Jacobs and Don Lipstein. Well, good morning, Don. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Beautiful day here on the island. And,
Oh, are you on an island? Oh, man. Did you walk around your lighthouse today?
I've been meaning to tell you that my island doesn't actually have a lighthouse.
Now
It's
you
it's
tell
the
me.
it's the island next door.
Oh, after 37 episodes, now it comes out that it's not actually your lighthouse on your island.
No, it's
Okay.
not.
Well, that's all
But
right.
I feel like all the wildlife that's here, that's lighthouse enough.
There you go. Don, I decided to put on a nice button-down dress shirt today. I just felt it. I suffer with chronic insomnia where I'm up usually every single morning at 2 or 3 a.m. for about 2 hours. And this morning I woke up and it was 7 a.m. and the sun was up and I was like, oh my gosh, I slept through the night. So I felt good. I thought I'm going to put on a button-down shirt and look presentable for this, for all those YouTubers that see this. For everybody else, you probably think I'm still wearing a t-shirt, but that's okay. So it's a good morning. I'm excited. Don, do you have a joke for us to start off? You've got all these traditional dad jokes there.
Yeah, I want to see how this one lands.
Oh boy.
I used to have a fear of speed bumps, but I'm slowly getting over it.
You don't want to go fast over them, that's for sure. You hurt your axles on that. So I tell you, you and your dad jokes, I love it. They're never ending. Well, Don, we're going to jump right into this. We have a special guest with us today, Andy McNiel. I want to turn it over to you, Don. Let you introduce Andy.
You know, I I had the good fortune of working with Andy for probably 4 years, maybe, at TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, which our listeners have heard that mentioned quite a bit. But Andy ran the Children's Good Grief program and just the children's program and did an amazing job. I was always so impressed with the thought and the love and the care that he put into that. Um, so now I know he's working uh, as an I think the executive director of Compassionate Friends. Is that correct?
Yep.
Um, and and I'm certain that the work that he was doing at TAPS is going to be coming out at Compassionate Friends, and I'm just grateful to know you and to have had the opportunity to work with you, Andy. I remember one particular seminar where you and I sat down and just talked and I learned so much and I was like, oh gosh. So when Greg told me that you were going to be on as a guest, I was like, yes. So welcome.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Thanks, Don and Greg. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Don, right back at you. It was an honor to serve at TAPS with you, and appreciate what what you brought there and what you're continuing to bring. And Greg, thank you again for doing what the two of you are doing. It's important that people in general, but even very specifically, that we have men who are talking about what you're talking about. It's breaking stereotypes and taboos in our society that I think will also aid in wellness and good mental health for men, to see other men addressing and talking about grief and its impact on our lives. So appreciate what you're doing.
Well said. I agree.
Thank you.
Andy, tell us a little bit about how did you get started into the grief field?
Yeah, it's a great question. We all have our own story of how we ended up in this very particular field, because it is it's a niche.
Yeah.
It's very specific. For me, I've had many losses in my life, as many of us have. Had a number of family members who have died, I don't know that any of those are what propelled me into this field. I did have a couple of significant losses in my early 20s. I have a cousin, Scott. I believe he was 19 and I was 18 when he died from suicide. Um, almost a year to the date, almost a year to that date later, my grandfather was murdered by actually a battle buddy, by someone he served with in World War II. I only knew the gentleman by the name of Major. That's what we called him. And Major came back from the war in a wheelchair, and back then they called it shell shock. If you
Yeah.
remember the language, we obviously call it something different today, but he was having an episode and some flashbacks and mixed with alcohol, and ended up killing my grandfather. And that all kind of happened in my early 20s. Though when I think about me being in this field, I don't ever necessarily connect those events to why I'm in the bereavement field. I grew up, my dad was a Southern Baptist minister, and kind of grew up in that environment, in a helping home, where that was kind of what you did. You cared about other people, their circumstances. I also have my younger sister. I have two siblings, an older brother and a younger sister. And my younger sister had serious physical, mental disabilities. And just, I watched how my parents struggled with that throughout her life. She's still alive. Both of my parents have died. And I think that probably had the biggest impact on me caring about people walking through profound loss in life. And though my sister didn't die, it was a huge, the only word for it is a huge loss. It was a profound loss for my parents to have to recalculate what does the rest of their lives look like as a result of my sister and her struggles. So probably those are the things that had the greatest impact. But I think more than anything, I kept finding in my early 20s, my work as a youth pastor, and then my clinical work for a master's in counseling. I kept finding myself in spaces with people who were experiencing profound loss. My clinical placement for my master's in counseling was at a place called the Amelia Center, which is in Birmingham, Alabama. It's named after Amelia Elliott, who died in a train car collision with several of her friends when she was 17 years old. And her parents, along with several of the parents in that situation, worked with Children's Hospital of Alabama and opened a bereavement center, because they said, we don't know where to go. Where do parents go when a child dies? So I was placed there. That was my placement. And I can remember the first child I ever sat with at that center. His sister was washed away in floodwaters. I sat there with him and I was humbled. And I thought, I don't hold his answers, but there's something that's happening in this space. And I'm humbled by it. And he in that space was able to work through some guilt and things that he had. Later that afternoon, I sat with a mom who both of her children had died in a car accident, and she had witnessed it. And I remember her saying to me, "Sir, I am in pain from the top of my head to the tips of my toes." And I just, and it impacted me. I went home that night and I told my wife, I think this is what I'll do the rest of my life. This is it. I really believe, I feel a strong calling to do this. And, the rest is kind of history. I very quickly went into this type of work. I ran a hospice program as their director of counseling. I went back to the Amelia Center as their executive director. I've been the CEO of National Alliance for Children's Grief. I've worked with TAPS. I've worked with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I think life chooses us sometimes. We don't choose it.
Yeah.
Wow.
What you just said really resonates with me. that space, holding that space for people. And, when I worked for TAPS, I felt like that's was my responsibility to do that. And I felt like I did pretty good. But I wanted to get on the other side of suicide
Yeah.
and prevent. So I left thinking that I was going to work with people that were in recovery and families that had children or loved ones that were trying to get into recovery. And I kept having people come into my space that were needing grief support.
Yeah.
Like the recovery piece wasn't coming to me. It was the grief people. So I decided, hey, I better stay with grief because that's where I felt comfortable. And it just, that space, creating that space is so vitally important for somebody to find their own path.
Don, I
So
think it's wild
thank
that
you
you
for,
say that's where you felt comfortable, the grief. I think that talking about grief is so commonplace for the three of us. But I think that there's such a facade out there. Andy, wouldn't you agree that there's just this kind of naivety in life where people just go along and if they've never experienced trauma or grief or loss, when it hits, it's the end of the world. And I loved what you said. I didn't hold his answers. So many people think that we have all the answers. We don't. You know what I like to say? I hold the flashlight in the dark for you. I come
Yeah.
along, people, and I just hold the flashlight. That's it. I've got maybe few more months down the road or a few more years down the road. But I also love what you said about your sister with special needs because Don and I are going to host a very special woman on here in another month or so, Heidi, who her and her husband basically have a special needs son, and just the aspect and the trauma and the difficulties that come along with that. So there's all different types of grief out there.
There is. Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think people who experience, you know, I like to use the word profound loss. We've been
Mm.
experiencing losses most of our lives from the moment we were born. We've experienced losses, and there are those just kind of losses that are just sort of part of life. There are certain losses, though, that are more profound than others. And the person that gets to define that is the person who's living it, not
right,
not the
right.
expert who decides, well, this is profound, but that's not profound. It's really in the eye of the beholder. And so for me, yeah, a person who experiences what they would term a profound loss for the first time ever are often taken back, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, our society has some constructs around what it means to grieve profound loss that do not adequately reflect the experience of grieving people. I would say that's one issue. You know, we've turned grief into we've given grief a definition of what we think it should be, not what it is. Because what it is hard, it's enduring, it's disruptive, it's not an easy process, and who would want to have to walk through that, right? So I think that's part of it. And then as far as us holding people's answers, I say this all the time. We don't hold other people's answers. What we can hold is space for them.
Mm.
And so our
Right.
society, as
What
a
Don was
result of
saying.
as a result of our constructs around grief being, it's 12 months, you get over it, you move on, all of those things. As a result of that, I think a lot of people just go into hiding. They stop talking to people about their grief and they just internalize it. And I've just met so many people, and me included at times in my life, where I'm not well. And when I really stop to think about it, I'm not well because I haven't done anything with the pain that's in my life. I haven't addressed it. I haven't leaned into it in any way, and I haven't found ways to be well. And I think we have in our society a lot of people who are walking around unwell
Yeah.
and don't relate it to a profound loss in their life.
And it's a taboo topic a lot of times. I remember I was in year one I hadn't even crossed over to year two yet. And the closest friend has been a lifelong mentor to me as a Vietnam vet. I was talking with him about losing David, and he goes, "Oh, you're still dealing with that?" And I don't say that to besmirch him. I say it because he was just naive. And then it was a couple months later, his best friend died. And I remember talking with him. He's like, "What are these feelings I'm feeling and these tears that are coming down?" And he had never experienced loss or grief. He had in Vietnam, but he had compartmentalized it and decided not to deal with it and confront it. But some people get all the way to their 70s and 80s, and then all of a sudden it just hits them because America does a piss poor job at explaining what grief is and walking alongside people and helping them, like I said, hold the flashlight.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you think about um, just physical conditions that are impacted by grief. We hold grief in our bodies just as much as it's a mental issue. Grief is not compartmentalized to our brains. Grief is mental, emotional, physical,
Yeah.
spiritual, social. It really disrupts every part of our lives. I love the title of your podcast, and that you had the word transformation in there, because I you know after over 30 years of holding space for people, when people ask me, well, then what is grief? My explanation is we need to stop trying to put grief into a
Mm,
box that fits really perfect. Grief is a personal experience that is enduring, that is disruptive, that is integral to the who the person is becoming, and that is transitional, and it is a transformation. We don't go back to something. We land in a new place
Right.
when we walk through profound loss.
Yeah, you're never going to be the person you were after that profound loss. You were talking, gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
While you're thinking of that train of thought, think about it, Don. We're going to come right back to that. I've made the comment, Andy, that if possible, that my DNA could be changed. It did. Because I think that people think on the outside looking in that, oh, it's old Greg, he's back, or that no, I'm a totally new, transformed person, and that scares a lot of people
Yeah.
because it's just different from what they've known, whether it's family or friends or whatever. Don, did you think about that thought?
Yeah, no, it was something that Andy said that I wanted to uh, expound on, and I just lost it. So,
It's all good. When you get to be as old
yeah,
as I am, Don, you'll know what it's like to have those fleeting moments where things just pass and go by. So,
yeah,
Well, I will say this: when it comes to transformation, it's counter to a lot of what we teach in our society. Our society, we focus a lot on restoration, on
mm,
trying to restore things back to the way they were, and it's just not the way life works. We don't go back. I mean, you know, I I think I'm accurate. I turned 54 this year. It's funny. I get my age wrong all the time, but I turned 54 this year. I'll never be 53 again, right? I don't go back to that. And I'm telling you, I'm being transformed. I'm at the age now where I can go to bed at night with no injury, sleep. I'm just sleeping, and I wake up in the morning and I've got an injury. Like how that happens, that is different, and we transform. But think about the shows, like you've seen the shows on HGTV where they're going to restore a house back to its original condition. We've all seen these shows. I always stop on them because I like to see the before and after.
yeah.
Um, they don't ever restore the house to its original condition. It's never
yeah,
restored. It's always transformed.
Mm,
And that's the truth about grief. We're not trying to get back to something. We're trying to figure out what now. Now,
yeah,
how do I, in the midst of profound loss, still have meaning and purpose and hope and connection? How do I still live life? How do I have relationships? And I'll just say this last thing, about this. I had a dad years ago who said it to me this way. He said, "Don't get me wrong. I would give anything to have my son back. This has nothing to do with my feelings on wanting my son back. He said, but I like the person I am now better than the person I was
I,
before my son died.
I
I'm
echo
not the
that.
same person,
I, I s-
and I get what he's saying. I'm
Yeah.
like,
yeah,
I hear you.
I say that all the time. And we had a guest on, you may know her, Joanne Harpel.
Yeah,
Um,
Joanne.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
she was on, and she said, we don't step forward, we evolve. It's an
it's
evolution.
Yeah.
a
Um,
great word.
and that's so true. And I think that's what you're talking about here, that we evolve, and transform is also a good word. But
Don, in that we've talked about this on this podcast before. Earlier on, I'm only 5.5 years out, and Andy, I'm 52 years old, so just a couple years younger than you. But so I can relate. I'm still dealing with a fractured arm. I'm like, how in the world did that happen? Um, but earlier on in years one, two, and maybe 2.5, three, going into it, I would make the comment that I'm a better man and a worse man than I was before David died. And people would be like, "Well, you can't be both. You have to reconcile the two." And I'm like, "No, no, it's kind of a mixture." Now that I'm 5.5 years out, and I feel like I'm 15 years out because I put the grief work in so strong every day. Not that there's a measuring stick to any of that, but I would just say that I've dropped the whole conversation of I'm a worse man. I'm a better man. When I look back, there is no way that I could have transformed into the person I am today at 52 years old if David hadn't died. That's not an endorsement for his death. That's not saying that I'm so glad he died. I absolutely wish that I could have it the other way and that I was just stupid, dumb, and naive. But I love harder. I empathize harder, and I come alongside a lot more people with a lot more compassion.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's what we're talking about is, I mean, the terms post traumatic growth, right? There's Tedeschi and Calhoun are the originators of that term, and this is what they were talking about. They gave it a term, but people have been experiencing it since human beings walked the earth and have had losses. The reality that that our profound loss impacts our lives. And I've actually talked to many people who they start to realize that there's some personal growth that's happening, who actually can struggle with that and even feel guilty
Mm.
for even
yes,
even experiencing that. And how can I carry and my grief and honor my person's death, and at the same time connect with life and living and other people, and see the world in a deeper, more meaningful way? How can those coexist? It almost seems contrary, and I think there's a part of grief where people have to reconcile that I can hold space for both of these things. I can carry my pain, and I can carry meaning and purpose and compassion and empathy and all of those things that are part of it too. And I can love the people who I still love, who are still here with me. I can love them deeply, and I can still love my person who died
Yeah.
deeply. It's I think that's part of the growth, really.
I,
Yeah.
I remember
yeah,
the first time I took my local group out of dads who've lost children, your dad forever, to bowling a night. And I remember us laughing so hard. And I remember a couple of them looking at each other and looking at me and saying, "Are we allowed to do this?"
Yeah.
And it was a struggle. It was like, we were having so much fun. And then the guilt set in. And it was like, no, we give ourselves this permission, this space to be able to do that. Now, when we go out, I'm telling you, we've gotten kicked out of restaurants laughing so hard. I mean, we just have a really good time, but it's what we need. And
Yeah.
it's counterintuitive to what you would think.
Yeah. For
I can
sure.
recall many times after TAP seminars going out with team members and just like laughing so hard at some of the things that may have occurred at a grief conference, right?
Yeah.
And um, it's kind of ironic. It
I
could be.
remember, I remember Rebecca Milani. when we had her on as a guest talking about that too, where she did that nationals and went to a restaurant and they were laughing so hard that they got kicked out. And I remember that story. You know,
Yeah.
Andy, I tell you, when you talk about post-traumatic growth, that was just the first time I ever heard that term was out of your mouth in Columbus, Ohio at a TAPS conference in 2021. I remember I could still see the slide and the PowerPoint up on the screen. And at that point, I had just overcome my PTSD from the notification officer ringing the doorbell and what I went through with that. So I've come a long way since then.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention, I really appreciate all your work you do and have done with children. So my 8-year-old grandson lost his dad, my son, and he was 3 years old. And it's just been heartbreaking, honestly, to see him grow up without a dad. And I've tried to fill that role as best I can. But more than anything, I'm just so proud of my daughter who has just come up alongside him and is just an incredible aunt to him. And it's interesting to watch how everybody handles their grief journey differently. Hannah handles her brother's loss by pouring into her nephew and coming alongside him. And we've got him for vacation Bible school all week, taking him to church, and it's just it's been really neat just to kind of see him grow into his own.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and it's, oh, go ahead, Don.
I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Andy, is I know that children, need special different types of care and than adults. And you've had a lot of experience with that. Is there anything you can speak to regarding that?
Yeah, I definitely, children, my career has been working with, I always say, creating space for people ages 2 to 102. That's the range of my experience.
If you're 103, you're out of luck, by the way.
Well, that's true. Well, I'm just saying I've never seen anyone who was 103 as far as they've come to me for support. But it could happen. I won't turn them away. Nor would I turn away a 1-year-old, but they're pretty young.
Yeah.
But with kids, I think the main thing to think about, and which is also true for adults, by the way, is that profound loss is not a one-time experience that happened in our past. Because we don't live linear lives. I said earlier, I'll never be 53 again, once I turn 54. I understand that there's a timeline, but we are cyclical human beings because we have memory and we have love. And we travel around a sun and on a planet that rotates night and day. We revisit every year anniversaries, birthdays. We live in a cycles, and so your 8-year-old grandson, lost his father, but it wasn't just a moment in time. It's loss is an ongoing thing that we live with, and so he's growing and developing as a human being, and at different developmental stages, he will revisit that loss in different ways because a child who's under the age of 5, their brain does not work the same as a child who's 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. A child who is 10 or older, their brain starts to work in a different way. They can think more abstractly about things. And then as they become teenagers, they find themselves in this place where they have this adult type of mind, but also sort of a child mind, but they're beginning to think about things in different ways. Loss, there's a long arc to loss, and we can grieve. We can have new grief over an old loss because now we see it and we understand it in a different way. There's a book by Hope Edelman. It's a really great book on it. She calls it the after grief, the long arc of loss. And Hope is most known for writing a book when she was younger about her mom's death. I think Hope was a teenager when that happened, and it's called Motherless Daughters. And in this new book, she wrote it in her 50s, and she said, look, I have new grief about my mom because now I'm in my 50s. I've raised my own kids, and I understand my relationship with my mom in a different way than I did. And so I'm grieving her in new ways than ever before. And so I think if we can think of it that way, we'll better understand what it's like for kids. Kids grieve. They just grieve differently at different ages. What they need from us in their lives stays very similar, though. They need us to be open to their questions. They need us to not minimize their pain by saying things like, "Oh, well, let's think about something else," or, thinking about that all the time is not good for you. Let's go over here and do this. That minimizes their pain. They need us to validate whatever it is they're experiencing at that moment, and they need us to demonstrate that you can have your grief, you can carry your grief, and you can also live life, and you can still do those things. They need us to demonstrate that, because that's really, people say, well, what is, getting through grief? It's learning to do both. And, that's the space that I've tried to create for kids, and any opportunity that I've had to lead programs for kids, or just to sit in a counseling room with a kid. I'm not in there as an adult who holds their answers. They hold their answers. They just don't know what they are at that moment. I hold the space.
Yeah. I think that modeling it for them, like for my grandson Thomas, I talk about his dad all the time. I'll show him pictures. We'll go down to the cemetery, but I talk about it, and I try to model my grief journey the best I can. And, you were talking about how you were a pastor's son. My wife is also a pastor's daughter. And, born again Christian, I tend to equate a lot of times when you talk about grief journey, the journey part gets left out. Yeah. Just like as a Christian, if you come up to somebody and you say, hey, tell me your testimony. What do? They go back to, church camp or the time they were baptized. Well, February 19th, 1992, which is when I, surrendered my life to the Lord. When somebody asks me, tell me your testimony, I very rarely ever go back to that. I start it last week because this is what is going on modern in my life. This is what's happening. This is a transformation that's going on where I'm surrendering a little more each day or whatever it might be. And I think it's the same way when you're looking at grief journey, as the title of this podcast, Turning Grief into Growth, the journey of transformation. There has to be this conversation about this morphing and this metamorphosis, like you were saying, Don, the evolution that we go through in the change. It can't be about December 23rd, 2020, when my son died in an auto accident, and it's a point in time and it stops there. It's the beginning point, but that's very rarely where I go back to.
Well, it started something.
Yes.
We're not robots. We're flesh and blood and a heart and mind and a soul, and we're shaped by the experiences that we have. And grief is an experience. If we just instead of the constructs about grief that somehow it's time limited, and if you don't get over it in a certain amount of time, then you have a mental disorder and all these things. If we could instead adopt a construct about grief, just seeing grief as an experience that we live, not a moment in time. It's an experience that we live that is shaping who we are becoming in our lives. And I add to it, and the choices we make while we're grieving matter.
Yeah.
Like, right? I mean, we all know people who have been transformed by loss that wake up one day and go, how the hell did my life become this? And they don't say, oh, I've really grown. They actually might find that they have gone backward in their lives. So there is this thing called personal agency that matters in the midst of our grief, what we choose to do with ourselves. It's not about choosing to grieve or not to grieve. Grief happens. But we can choose to lean into it a little more. We can also choose, behaviors and activities and things that produce wellness, even if we don't feel connected to that at the moment. I think it's Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning that really drove this point home, based on his experiences in the death camps in World War II. You know, the idea of that even in circumstances that we can't control, we still have choices. We can choose our attitude. We can choose, what we do with ourselves to some degree. He went as far as saying he knew in those death camps that the Nazis could come in at any point and just drag him out and kill him. And he knew that was a reality because he watched it happen. And what he said is, he said, they can do that, but I decided that they didn't get to choose the attitude I had when they did it. And that's powerful, really.
It is power.
Yeah. That we had an episode that we talked about choice, and how impactful the choices that we make are in our grief journey. So I'm glad you're talking about this now.
There's a an interesting phenomena to me, and that is those that are going through really traumatic, profound loss, like the loss of a child, for example. Very rarely do they see the growth in themselves. It has to be pointed out to them majority of the time. So Don, for example, would come alongside me earlier on and still to this day, and he'd be like, Greg, I don't think you realize how far you've come. I don't think you realize even day one when I first met you, you were like 3-4 weeks out, how you were inquisitive, you were asking questions, you were, so I have learned that. And when I come alongside people, I affirm them. And I remind them of kind of where they were. I'm like, hey, you remember a year ago in this peer support group, you weren't even able to open your mouth. You weren't even able to talk about your loss. And now you're one of the main people that's speaking up. And he's like, yeah, but I just don't feel. I said, no, that is progress. So I'm a firm believer in supporting progress. When you're talking about that evolution, Don, when you're talking about that transformation, we don't see it in ourselves. So make sure that if you're not receiving that, that you find somebody that can pour into you and give you affirmation out there to encourage you. Because otherwise, we just look in the mirror every single day and see ourselves the way we were.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think in some ways, one of the reasons for that is that the grief itself is still so painful.
Yeah.
Again, we live in a society that wants to solve the pain. And the issue with grief is that it's painful. It remains painful that my child died, that my spouse died, that my parents died, that remains painful. The grief is still there. The part of the journey of grief is not to get rid of the grief. It's to learn how to carry it. And it's being able to get our feet under us and what that looks like. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I had a lady in one of our years ago, I facilitated a group for women in their 70s and 80s who had a spouse die. I was in my late 20s. Imagine what they thought when they walked in the first time. Who is this Yahoo? And what is he going to offer us? Yeah. I mean, I at that point had been married maybe a few years. I don't know, and I'm like, what does this guy know? But again, by that time in my life, I had learned my role is to hold space, not to be the expert of their grief. I ran that group for about 4 years, every Wednesday night. 4 years, and those ladies came religiously. And one night, one of the ladies said, I'm just tired. I'm tired of this. I'm tired. I am no better off than I was 2 years ago when my husband died. And I'm just tired. And that was her statement. And so one of the other ladies said to her, well, I've known you for 2 years, and actually, I don't think you're in the same place. And she said, Andy, can we talk about this tonight? Like, let's all talk about what it was like when our child first died and what it's like for us now. And we talked. And what was interesting is the pain of the loss was very, very similar. What was different was how folks had learned to carry it and how they had leaned into life and develop new relationships and how they had grown personally. And we spent, it might have been one of the best groups that we ever conducted, because by the end of the group, people had said things like, well, yeah, I can drive in the car now and not cry every time the radio comes on. And I could, all of a sudden they were seeing these things that were different about them. And at the end of the evening, the lady who brought it up at the beginning, she said, this was very helpful. You're right. I'm not in the same place that I was. And I'm leaving here with a little more hope than I walked in tonight. Right. Yeah.
Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah.
No doubt.
The way we grieve and the differences, yeah, and Joshua's birthday is tomorrow. He'd be 39. I hear so many people say forever, like he died at the age of 23, and people would say forever 23. Well, I carry every birthday, I make him a year older because he is a year older.
Yeah, same for
he may
me.
not be living, but and I find ways to celebrate his life, especially on his birthday. The anniversary or the day of remembrance is not a day that I give as much attention to, but his birthday I do, because it was one of the happiest days of my life. And I decided just the other day that he's turning 39. What can I do to honor his birthday? And I haven't done a push-up in I don't know how many years, but I'm doing 39 push-ups tomorrow.
Nice. Can you record that?
Somebody actually said they were going to, and I think I'm going to have my family do it with me too. I'm not going to sit there and do 39 push-ups all at once, but I will do 39 push-ups.
Spread out over 24 hours. I believe in you. You've got it. You can do this, Don. I think that's awesome. And I tell you, I think everybody grieves differently when it comes to that memory of that date. My son was 21 when he died. You see Forever 21 everywhere. I've never embraced that personally for me. It's just, David would have been 27. And I think that because I bring him along with me everywhere I go, every day, I keep him alive, I talk to him, he can't stay 21 for me to do that. So that's what I choose. It's the way that I handle it. It's the way that I grieve, and everybody's different.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, Don.
Josh looks pretty good for being 39 years old.
He hasn't aged at all.
Not at all.
That's awesome.
Not since 23. Andy, as we begin to wrap this up, I'm just wondering, do you have any nuggets of wisdom that you can share with our listeners? Just something that they can take back with them and hold on to.
Yeah. So I will say this, just maybe a couple of comments. One is, no matter wherever it is that you are in your grief, it's okay wherever you are, whatever that might be. Grief is messy. It's hard. It's all of those things. As we've said today, it's also transformational. So if you're finding yourself at a place where there have been parts of your life that has been transformed, that's okay too. And that's not an insult to your person or to their memory. And we live in a society that does like to just leave things behind and move forward. And the reality is we can take our person forward with us, as the two of you so eloquently laid out there. And many people who have found that when they begin to do that, instead of trying to figure out how they can get far away from the loss, they realize that, the person who died, they don't want to be far away from that person, and holding that person close to them and bringing them along can be helpful. And if you're early in your grief, and all you can do is just kind of maybe get out of the bed and maybe breathe, do that. Those are choices that you're making. They're hard ones, but keep making them. I personally have had my own losses, and I also have walked with a lot of people. I've witnessed a lot of loss, but also a lot of transformation and a lot of growth. And I can say, from my vantage point and what I have viewed, it's worth the struggle. It's worth hanging in there. It's worth making those hard choices, whatever they are. Again, the hard choice could be just to get your feet on the floor that morning, or to take the next breath, whatever it is. It's worth it. And then the last thing I'd say is find your community.
Yeah.
Connect. Find some folks like these guys, like people who have had a similar experience to you, who are your peers, who you can, if nothing else, just call and say, I just need another person on the other end of the phone at this moment, or I need another human being to sit in the room with me who gets it, that I don't have to explain myself. Find a community that you can connect with. You know, it's an honor, a sacred honor to serve the organizations I've served. A sacred honor to serve Compassionate Friends right now. And, you know, TAPS, the Compassionate Friends, so many different organizations that do peer support. They do it because it works. So if you haven't plugged into a peer support network, do that. Connect up. It doesn't cost you anything. Most of these programs are free. You know, you might get a donation solicitation, but that's what nonprofits do. It's how we fund ourselves. But you don't have to donate. You don't have to do anything. You just have to show up and be there and be supported. So thank you both for the opportunity to be on part of this podcast and to share. It's been a great conversation. You know, anything I can do moving forward to continue this conversation, I'm glad to do that and support it.
Thank you, Andy.
Yes, thank you, Andy. And we look forward to partnering with you more in the future. And I couldn't agree more with what you just said. So find your group and your tribe, and don't do life alone. So, all right. Well, thank you. And folks, until next time. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen. We hope turning grief into growth spoke to your heart and becomes a part of your own journey of healing and transformation. If you know someone who could use a little hope, please share this episode with them. And don't forget to follow, like, or subscribe on your favorite platform so you don't miss what's coming next. Don and I can't wait to share more conversations to help you keep turning your grief into growth. Until next time.